Welcome, everyone, to the Wilmington School Committee meeting of October 26th, 2017. 25th. I'm skipping ahead a day. October 25th, 2017. I call the meeting to order at 7:06. If you would, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. That was one of the best renditions we've ever had. All right. Our first order of business is the approval of items by consensus. We'll start with the approval of minutes from our October 11, 2017 regular session. Do I have a motion? Jen, do I have a second? Manny? All those in favor? Approved, unanimous?
No, you've got two abstentions. Maybe you weren't there.
Oh, I apologize, I didn't see that, I'm sorry. Two abstentions, Peggy and Julie. All right, our next item is approval of out-of-state field trip. Wilmington Middle School Great East Festival to Hampstead, New Hampshire, and Canopy Lake. Any questions or comments from the members?
I have a question.
Yes.
Could we find out, I just want to clarify this, is the festival held at Canopy Lake, or is there two separate venues for the
I
festival?
believe it's two separate venues. It looks like it's at Hempstead High School, I think.
Okay,
Yeah, Hampstead Middle School.
Middle school?
okay.
Yeah, middle school.
So it looks like they're at the middle school for an hour and a half, and then at Canopy for 4.5? Okay.
5.5, actually.
5.5, actually,
5.5 hours,
okay,
yeah.
I miscounted. So I don't want to be the fun police, but I was just curious about the canopy aspect. Sounds like a fun time.
Certainly does. Anything else? All right, do I have a motion? Tom moves to approve. I have a second. I'm seeing no second. Peggy will second, all right. We'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of approving? All right, looks like we've got 4 in favor. All those opposed? 1 opposed? And any abstained? Peggy, I'm sorry, did you vote on this?
Yes, I voted. I was one of the votes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
All right, so it looks like it,
On that, I will get some information on the rest of
Okay,
that
I
stuff.
just-
Yep, no, I will.
Just in
I'll follow up.
consideration
Yep,
of the
I'll follow up.
discussions we've had on field trips,
Sure, I will follow up.
just seems like,
Yep.
all right, and seeking to approve warrants G 407, R 205, R 206, L 13, L 14, L 15, L 16, L 17, FS 04, FS 05, and FS 06. Do I have a motion? Peggy, do I have a second? Tom? All those in favor? That is unanimous. All right, and warrants payroll, 102517. Do I have a motion? Jen, second? Tom? All those in favor? And 1 abstention? Peggy?
Yes.
All right, warrants SPED 04, SPED 05. Do I have a motion? Jen? And do I have a second? Was it Manny? Did I see you?
Yes.
A second from Manny. All those in favor? It is 5 in favor, 1 abstention, being myself. All right. We're now going to move, our next order of business is a student presentation on the PBIS core values by the Butwell kindergarten class. Paul, do you want to give any kind of intro or introduce?
I'd like to
Walsh?
introduce Kristen Walsh, the Boutwell Early Childhood Director, who will have the students perform for us.
thank you so much for having us. This year at the Bow Early Childhood Center, we've been implementing positive behavior interventions and supports. And all the students have learned our 3 core values, which is be kind, be safe, and try even when it's hard. So here to perform a very special song that we sing at all of our community meetings is our friends in room 2, Miss O'Toole's class. And I do have a feeling that someday the producers from America's Got Talent might come knocking on some doors. So I just want you all to be ready, okay? All right, so boys and girls, are we ready? Yes. We're gonna sing nice, loud, and proud, okay? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Be kind, be safe, try even when it's hard. Be kind, be safe, try even when it's hard. We can all work together in any type of weather. Be kind, be safe, try even when it's hard. Good job.
Thank you, everybody. That was terrific.
Sure. Boys and girls, do you want to say your names? Okay, who's this? Alki.
Abby, Eva, Zoe, Chloe, Annie, Keegan, Timlin, Gabriel, Alyssa, Joshua, Zachary, Luke, Adeline.
Good job. Give a wave. Good job.
Forget to wait for the camera, guys.
Right?
Could I just make one comment?
Yeah, you want to?
I just wanted to say, boys and girls, that my granddaughter is now in 6th grade, but when she was in kindergarten, her teacher was Miss O'Toole. And she was wonderful then, and I can see, Kristen, you've brought this right along to now. She'll be so excited to see you on TV.
Thank you.
So you were wonderful. She was just talking about you the other
I
night.
feel like she was just in kindergarten.
She does, I know. So I'm so glad you have Miss O'Toole.
Guys, thank you so much for visiting us and singing that song for us. Bye.
I just have to say, I think that's great, and sometimes we lose track of why we're really here. That's why we're here.
That's exactly.
That's why we're in this profession, so that was just great.
Well said, Paul. Well said. All right, moving on to our superintendent report.
Thank you. A couple things. One, this Saturday, the high school gym will be dedicated to Lawrence Cushing Senior. It starts at 11 a.m. If anyone's interested, just for the public. Also, informationally, MCAS results were released on October 18th. We're still in the process of analyzing them and so forth. Assistant Superintendent Gallagher will be doing a presentation at our November 8th meeting. The individual scores will be getting mailed out to students in the next week or so, along with a letter from the acting commissioner explaining the difference in the test and so forth. So on the 8th, as I said, Assistant Superintendent Gallagher will be presenting to the school committee.
All right. Our next order of business is our superintendent search update, and we are very happy to have NESDEC here to provide us with our orientation. All right, if you join us, that would be wonderful. Welcome.
He's going to be standing, I think.
That'd be perfect, yeah.
Hello all, good evening.
Good evening.
It's nice to see you all again. That's a tough act to follow, by the way.
Do you sing?
I do sing, but not that well. I know, that was really great. I was thinking we could all use some of that training now and again, couldn't we? It's just wonderful, really, really wonderful. And kudos to the school committee for focusing on what's really, as you mentioned, what really is important. The children are clearly the most important thing, and it's great to see that they're showcased here in front of you and in front of the community. That's wonderful. I've come here to talk to you about your superintendent search and to start it. So for this evening, I have a number of things to go through with you. I can jump right in, or did you have anything that you wanted to convey?
By all means, yeah, jump right in. Let's.
Okay. I have some things to hand out. May I do those? So one for you, I believe you have one.
I have one.
Yeah, and I think Jennifer has one as well. Oh, wait a minute, mine's actually on top there. I probably need my own.
That's right.
That one's got all the encrypted.
It's got all the
It's got
notes
the
in
real
it.
pricing on it.
Just by way of introduction, my name is Art Betancourt. I'm the Executive Director of the New England School Development Council, otherwise known as NESDEC. And we were very fortunate to be engaged to help you folks conduct your next superintendent search. And we're very pleased to be here, and we thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to work with you. This evening, what I'd like to do is go through a number of items that will get us jump-started to actually begin the search. The fact of the matter is the search begins now with some of the decisions that you folks will make. And it will go probably for the next 3 or 4 months, depending upon how things are calendared and work out as we move through the various parts of the process. I'm here this evening as one member of a team of 3, actually. My colleague, Carolyn Burke, Dr. Carolyn Burke, is up in Maine right now on another assignment. And we have another consultant that can be available for us as well as we get into the work of working with your community and the various elements of the search that we're engaged in. So you will have easy contact with any one of the 3 of us, certainly always with me, but there will always be somebody there when you need us to either work through whatever questions you have or whatever elements of the search are going on that you want to know more about. So I would invite certainly you to stay in touch with us all through the process. I think the process is demanding for a school committee. And I think what it will do is it will take some of your time, it will take some of your energy, and it will certainly take some of your focused attention. On the other hand, although it is a lot of work for a school committee, I think most of you would agree that it is probably the most important work that you have in front of you, to select your leader for the future to come. So we will be meeting with you from time to time, communicating with you occasionally about what's going on in the search, but you're always welcome to communicate with us in terms of any questions that you may have or anything that you need to know. The folder this evening I have in front of you is basically the guide for the search or for the conversation this evening. And so what I'd like to do is to jump right into the guide, ask you some questions. You will have to make perhaps some decisions this evening if you can, and that will get us started. As I mentioned to you, in terms of the overview of the search, it begins now. It will probably proceed for about 120 days is a typical search. And in that period of time, some of the work that is typically done we have some excitement out back here. Some of the work we would anticipate that you would delegate to a subcommittee, and we'll talk about that as we get into the search. The idea being that when the search process is complete, you should be ready to appoint your new superintendent by February or early March, as we have it mapped out for you. So, The very first thing I'd like to get established with you is who we will communicate with as your school committee representative. Sometimes it's the chair, sometimes it's the appointment of another member, but what we would like to do as an organization is be able to communicate with one person on the school committee directly when we need to. If you're not prepared to do that this evening, you can talk about it at a subsequent meeting and let us know, but that would be an important thing for us to do, so I'll defer to you.
I was just going to suggest that we utilize our chair to be our point of contact, as that role is frequently our spokesperson on a variety of topics.
That's fine. Well, we should probably take a vote on that, right?
And there also, can I say something? There also needs to be, you had mentioned at the negotiation meeting, maybe a chair.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Okay.
So we have, I guess we have a motion. Do we have a second for me to be the point person? I was gonna say motion failed for lack of second.
Do you have time for this? Can we just discuss that part before?
Yeah. Obviously, as a couple of you know, the position of chair is very demanding. It takes up a lot of hours. I think this is something that I can probably take on. If not, we can make a change. All right, how is that for confidence? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? 2, all those opposed? 1?
I'm not sure I'm opposed, but.
Yeah, I would like to see like a second person also as well.
Maybe we're not ready to.
If you're not ready this evening, you can certainly discuss it at a future meeting and decide. I can tell you that the reason for a contact is obvious. We want to communicate with one person on the school committee who can then speak for the school committee back to us. It's not terribly demanding. We don't anticipate a lot of conversations, and certainly decisions that are made are not made by unless they're routine decisions are not typically made by the liaison, but basically that he or she serves as the communications link between us and the school committee. As Jennifer mentioned, sometimes there are 2 people. Sometimes it's the chair and the vice chair, for example, that share that role, which might help as well. But if you're not prepared this evening, that's fine.
Can I just make a comment? 4 years ago, when we went through this process, I served as the point of contact. But the reason why I did is our then chair was not able to do so due to a perceived conflict of interest, so that's why I did it. I was not the chair or the vice chair.
Okay.
Just as a point of information.
It can be any member, sure, absolutely.
Until we decide who that person is, so we need to have someone that you need to contact, or we need to have a point person, until we have an official point person.
Peggy, what were you going to say?
I just wanted to clarify at the very beginning of this that you won't be hearing from me, Dr. Betancourt. I have a daughter who teaches in the system.
Okay.
So I'm not allowed to participate, but I'm just sitting here.
Okay.
Smiling when it's happy and.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate the explanation. Thank you very much.
All right.
Would you like to?
Here's my thought on this, is we are going to have to appoint somebody, and we certainly can't deliberate on this outside of a public meeting. Given what you've just said, I certainly, I think I can certainly add that to my workload without a problem. However, if there are any other nominations, by all means, is anybody willing to step up? By all means, now's the time to speak.
So I'm willing to step up, but I also would be interested in Julie serving as the chair, but I know it's a humongous time, and she's already done it. But she did it, and she did it well, and so part of me is feeling like she really knows what this process entails, and I'm happy to do it as well, but I also think that she'd be a really great fit if she were willing, or I'd be happy to be the chair and maybe ask her to assist but that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you for the vote of confidence.
Sure.
But having gone through this process before, I am willing to help in a backup capacity, but I am not interested in being the chair.
Understood. All right, Jen has shown a willingness, and my nomination failed. Do we have a vote for, do we have a second for Jen?
I'll second it.
Tom? All those in favor of Jen?
Can I just
Oh.
ask a clarifying question? I know we're going to discuss the screening committee and the makeup of the screening committee as part of the conversation at some point this evening, I would guess. If somebody is interested in representing the school committee as the screening committee individual, could they also be the spokesperson?
Sure.
Does that make sense to do it
Sure.
that way?
Sure.
Okay.
And in addition, I think it's also fair to say that the people that you're putting in place who would be the liaisons with us, you might also consider them as the spokespeople for the committee to the public. Now, you can differentiate those roles, or they can be one and the same. But for example, if the press were to call us for an update, we would prefer that we not give the update, because this is your search. So in fact, you might want to consider the role of the liaison as also the role of the spokesperson for the school committee, or you may wish to differentiate that role. And that's something you probably don't need to do that right now, but at some point in the near future, you might want to decide how that works. But it's whatever way you're comfortable in terms of the committee and the way it wants to work.
So we have a motion and a second. All those any other comments, any other discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Can I vote for myself or no?
You certainly can.
So it is Jen as the liaison,
She will be the liaison.
and is there a backup liaison? Is that what I heard in the motion or not?
For lack of,
Can I make
Don't-
a motion
Don't feel obligated to do this.
I'm just trying to clarify, I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
Sure.
I wasn't,
If you want.
do you want
if
to
I
wait?
can-
We can wait.
yeah, let's
wait.
Okay, all right, so we've got the point person.
okay. So Mrs. Bryson is the liaison, so we will be in touch with you as we go through the search. Great. And if as you move through the search, you want to change these things, you want to change the roles because of time or because of, whatever other things might get in the way of that person functioning in the way that they want to, that's fine, as long as we know who it is. And what that does is it saves us from having to make 7 calls, and perhaps getting 7 different points of view in each of those calls. So I thank you for that. On the right-hand side of your packet, there's a multicolored document that looks like this. This is the timeline for your search. Now, you'll notice that it's a working draft, and it is a draft as of, Monday. Because it's a working draft, we understand that as the search unfolds, some of these dates that are assigned to these things may change. But this gives you, I think, a broad perspective or a broad outline of where things fall and who's responsible for what. And you can see right here, the orientation meeting, which I had anticipated would be on Monday, but is really today, involves several things. The first of which is to name the liaison, which you have done. The second of which, and this is really stated too strongly, not really to approve the timeline, but to look at it at this point and determine, at least at this stage in our thinking, the timeline in front of us makes some sense. So just let me highlight a couple of dates in here that I think are significant that we should take a look at. Number one, it's our understanding that your anticipated start date is, for the new superintendent, is on or about July 1. Is that consistent with the committee's thinking?
Correct.
Okay. Now, that can shift around based on the person that you hire and that person's availability. But the fact of the matter is, if you're looking at a July 1 beginning date, you may in fact appoint the superintendent well in advance of that date, which would allow you some transition time in the district. So if you recall, I said that you'd probably be prepared to make your decision in February or March. the period March to July 1 could represent a transition period for you in terms of visitations, getting to know the district and that sort of thing. And we can talk about that as we get closer to that date. We want to begin this campaign, outreach campaign and advertising campaign as quickly as we can. And so I'm going to go over with you an invitational letter and some text for an online ad. If it's possible to get those things finalized by October 30, which is tight, we can produce a pretty aggressive timeline in terms of getting things going. So I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. But we're prepared to get your advertising campaign going very quickly. Part of the reason for that is once we get the text, approved text from you in terms of what you say about yourselves as a district, most of what we do is electronic. So we can get up and running and put that stuff out almost immediately. And what we do is we put it out in stages. We put out an initial posting, we put out an initial blast, and then we follow that up periodically to remind people that the position is out there and that there is a deadline by which they should apply. And that will be a national outreach, which I think is what you're expecting. So to get that text approved quickly will be important. And you may, I don't know how you function as a committee in this realm, but you may want to assign that particular piece of work to a school committee member or two who can work with us and then work back through you to get that text approved. And we can talk more about that if you wish as we go on. In your contract, we do have a community needs assessment piece. The community needs assessment is typically comprised of a web-based survey, which is proprietary. We have that ready, and we can put that up almost instantaneously for you once we determine when you want it up. It also involves focus groups. Now, in your contract, we have stipulated 6 focus groups. And we'll talk a little bit more about those as we go on as well. But the idea is that it gives the opportunity for the community to give you input as a school committee so that you understand what the community is expecting in its new superintendent of schools. The idea being that when we accumulate all of this data from the focus groups and the web-based survey and possibly from some interviews that we do in town, we will bring that information to you as a school committee. And we will go over that information, that data with you, and ask you what it means. How do you reflect upon it? And then based upon your reflections, we develop what's called a candidate profile, which is a probably 1 or 2 page document, usually bulleted, which indicates the characteristics, the experiences, the kinds of things, the background, the kinds of things that you're looking for in your new superintendent. That tells the public what you're looking for in your new superintendent. It also tells prospective candidates what you're looking for in the new superintendent as well. And it forms the basis for, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, forms the basis for how your screening committee develops its interview questions and how you as a committee, in fact, might develop your interview questions when it gets to the point of the final interviews. The community needs assessment and the advertisement or the outreach are occurring very early in the search and will continue for a while we are also accumulating applications and recruiting candidates. The next yellow line in your outline here indicates to begin the review of applications, which is actually your application deadline. So assuming that we get everything out in terms of outreach the first week in November, which would be our goal, we would ask candidates to have their applications and all of their paperwork into us by December 14th, which is obviously before the holiday break, which is what we're trying to do. And then we will then work through organizing all of those applications and putting them in a form that then can be dealt with that your screening committee and the school committee can deal with. Again, if all is said and done, by the time your screening committee is through, they hopefully will be able to announce those candidates that they'd like you to consider as a school committee by January 31st. And if we can accelerate that process, certainly we will. And a lot depends on your meeting dates and the other business that you have. You have budgets to think about and those kinds of things as well. So all of those things have to fit into place, okay? Let's talk a little bit, if we can, about your outreach. On the left-hand side of your packet, the very last sheet, we have for you a draft of a letter, an informational letter that goes out, usually goes out over my signature. It could go out over the chairman's signature if you wish. What this represents is a template for you, school committee, to develop your own outreach informational letter. This letter would go out in hard copy to about 800 points of contact via mail. The letter is also used, the text in the letter that you develop is also used for all of your other advertisements. So what we do is we take excerpts from this letter and we develop an electronic announcement which goes out as an email blast, and that goes out 3 or 4 times during the period that we're recruiting. So you'll notice that we've put some things in here to sort of guide you in the process of writing or composing your letter. But we've also said down here, and these are not my words, these are my colleagues' words who put this together. There's also a place for you to include your bragging points, which are those things that you think are unique to your school district that you would want candidates to know about. There might be awards, there might be special programs that you have in your school district, certainly things that your kids, your students are involved in that you think are special and unique to Wilmington, and other thoughts that you may have about your school district that you think would attract people and tell people something about your district that would be important for them to know as they consider applying. So this piece of work needs to be done fairly quickly, within the next few days if you can do it. And this would be the document that I would be communicating with Mrs. Bryson about periodically over the next few days to see how it's coming along. Now, as I said before, you may want to have a couple of people who are responsible for putting this together rather than it coming back through the whole committee. Sometimes it's given to the administration to do. And you can certainly talk about that and determine the best way to do it. Or there may be another way that you have in mind that you'd like to get this done. But getting this done is really one of the first orders of business for us, is to get text that you approve that we can use to describe your district. So perhaps I could leave it to you for a little insight there.
Yeah, I think we'd like some input from within the district about some of these bragging points. I'm certainly sure that we've got a few points that we'd all like to include. I'll be happy to cobble this together and come up with some points for you to incorporate.
Okay.
And I think we can probably do that within the next couple of days if you send maybe a request out to the district, to the administration team perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Or if you need to speak with me about it, Paul, you can do that in terms of how you might process things through. You know, if we can help, please feel free to do that.
Can I ask you this?
Yes.
In the course of your searches, is there something that has stuck out that you thought was extremely compelling?
Yeah, the accomplishments of the students is really something that I think people want to hear about. You know, there are a lot of wonderful things that you're doing as a district, a lot of wonderful programs, but the kinds of things that your students are involved in and being recognized for are really, I think, important things to put in. And it keeps the focus of the outreach on your students. So I would suggest that would be one thing that you'd want to concentrate on. The other might be major programmatic initiatives that you have, new curriculum initiatives that you might think are important, because a new leader would have to come in and be aware of those and bring those forward. So I would say those are the 2 areas that you might want to concentrate on. If you wish, I can forward this probably to Jennifer as a Word document. If you'd like to rework the whole thing, I can do that as well. So, any questions on that? Or?
I just have a comment to Steve or Julie. Did we have something like this for the one we did 4 years ago?
We do.
So maybe we could build off of that one, you know? And we can also discuss our MCAS scores that just came out that were favorable.
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Okay, if you need any help, I'm sorry.
That's okay, just some things I was thinking about would be the one-to-one Chromebook initiative might be something of interest. The strings program, the band, some of the awards, some of our Latin scholars. I mean, there's a lot of those sorts of things that I think might play in well to this, where someone who's looking for a new position might say, oh, good, that's what I was, athletic awards, championships, those sorts of things.
And, yeah, and a balance between the athletics and.
And the music,
and the
yeah.
arts, I think, is important, too.
Agreed.
I think you want to show a balanced picture, which you have,
Yeah.
obviously, as programmatically.
Maybe PBIS, I don't know.
Yeah, I focused on your 2 and 4 year acceptance rate, it's over
Yep.
93%.
Oh,
That's,
wow, absolutely.
Post.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Good for
And-
you.
And your one-to-one, the one-to-one Chromebook initiative, yeah.
Okay, so it sounds to me like you've got great ideas. It shouldn't take too long for you. And if you want to give them to us in rough form, we can clean it up. And then what we would do is we'd run the final back through Jen before we published, and then Jen could distribute as you folks wished. But if we can get going on that, that's great. Sounds to me like you're well on your way, so that's terrific. Thank you for that. Going back to the timeline, does the timeline as it's now configured make sense to you? Is it within your expectations as far as, you know, when you folks will be able to make your final decision? I'd like to say that we could accelerate it, but what gets in the way are the holidays. And it isn't us that's bothered by the holidays, it's all the people that you have to get together to process these things that really gets in the way. So we've tried to build it in such a way that the holidays don't get in the way to the point where we can, accomplish what we need to accomplish, but, you know, giving people obviously the opportunity to be free for the holidays if they can be. So does this make sense to everyone, at least for the moment? And we can certainly change it.
Yeah, I think I would just say that it obviously makes sense, and obviously the quicker we can do it, the better.
Yep.
At the same time, it's aggressive, and I think all of us as individuals need to self-reflect a little bit and understand what we can and cannot do, because this is a lot of work for us.
It
Even
is.
though we are utilizing your services, this is a lot of work for
It is.
us.
It
And I
is.
think we need to self-reflect a little bit, and everyone has to do their share.
Well, the timeline is an open document. So I wouldn't ask for your approval this evening or at any time during the course of the search. But as you discuss things, if you see areas where you want to accelerate, for example, you think we can, before you commit to the acceleration, I'd appreciate a call so that we know, so that we're sure we can do it. But if there are other ways that we can meld things together or move more quickly than maybe we're anticipating, that's fine too. There may also be those occasions when you actually want to slow down. And typically that happens at the end of the search when you have the school committee in deliberations, needing time to get all of their things in line. I mean, you're busy, and this falls at a very busy time of year for you. And so a lot will depend on how you schedule yourselves for meetings where you get certain pieces of this done. But we can talk about that as we move along, Mr. Chairman.
This timeline is based on getting quality applicants
Yeah.
within that timeframe.
Yep.
If we don't generate the number of applicants that we're looking for, the quality of applicants, what happens at that point?
We're with you until this search is done. So
But what happens to the timeline? How
Well,
does-
it could be that we push it out a bit, or it could be that we look at closing down and starting up again at another time. Those are all decisions you make down the road. I'm anticipating that this is a very attractive position. I've already spoken to people on the phone about it who've called me. So I know the word is already out there, and of course, it was in the newspapers last week or the week before. So I'm anticipating that it will be an attractive position, and therefore I'm anticipating that the applicant pool should be good. If it isn't, then we'll deal with that. The other thing that I think it's important for you to know is, and I think I may have mentioned this to you before when I spoke to you previously, if you get to the point where you've gone through all of the applicants and you've reviewed them and you've interviewed and you decide that in that process you just didn't find the right person, that's not a failure. That's part of the process. It means that we keep looking until we find the person who's the right fit. If that takes longer and takes more processing and takes more outreach and takes more recruiting, then that's what we'll do. But it's part of the process. And so you have to remain open to that possibility. But on the other hand, we're going to work very hard to find you the candidate in the first round that will fulfill your needs. Did that answer your question?
You did, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so the timeline is an open document, and that can change depending upon things that you folks see or occurrences that we have to adjust for. The other thing that I mentioned to you is your community outreach, your needs assessment. We're anticipating doing 6 focus groups for you. Those focus groups will probably do their work during the month of November, possibly into early December, but most of that will be done. It's usually done, the focus groups are usually done on 2 days, 2 full days, where we have probably 2, maybe 3 consultants in the district meeting with focus groups. Now, what is a focus group? A focus group is a group identified by you, the school committee, of a particular constituency that you invite to come together to speak with us. And what we do is we ask open-ended questions of that group, trying to get out of that group what they feel are the important characteristics, backgrounds, skills, experiences that they would like to see in the new superintendent. Who are some of the constituency groups that you might consider? You would want to consider, I would think, teachers. You might want to consider teachers at different levels. You more than likely, I think, would want to consider parents. And you might want to consider what the best time of the day is to attract a group of parents who could speak to us, and we can talk to you more about that. You might want to consider members of your administrative team. You might want to consider support staff. You might want to consider a municipal constituency, municipal officials, perhaps. And there are other constituencies that you may know about that you would like us to talk to. But the idea being that in the next 2-3 weeks or so, we would like to know those constituencies that you would like us to speak to, and we would like to work out a schedule with you early enough so that we can put an announcement out, so that you can put an announcement out. We can give you all of the templates, so you can put an announcement out to the community about these focus groups and when they're going to meet. So there are really 2 things to think about: the constituencies that you'd like, and as I said, there are 6 focus groups in your contract. If you need 7, that's fine. If you need 8, that's fine. We're not going to quibble over the number. But we want to hit those people or talk to those people that you think are important to be part of this process. Now, the purpose of that is really twofold. One, we get the input from the community on a face-to-face, very personalized basis. But number 2, you've also brought the community into the process in a very important way. So this is a very important part of the process. And Carolyn Burke, who you have not met yet, Dr. Carolyn Burke is an expert in community interactions. And she will be working more than likely with another colleague here in the district. And as I said, we usually do this on 2 full days. It's usually 3 per day. Sometimes it's 4 in a day. Sometimes it's an early morning meeting. Sometimes it's an evening meeting, depending upon the group that you're trying to attract. So you can be thinking about that. And again, I will be in touch with Jennifer as to what your thinking may be, not only in terms of the constituencies, but when we can schedule them. Keep in mind that when we schedule them, we need enough time to get the word out so that we can tell people when these are, so that they're aware of them. Yes.
Yeah, and I apologize if I've missed this, but what, do you have an ideal
number of people in each focus group?
We don't. We like to have fewer than 20. That seems to work well. But we don't do this by invitation unless you wish to. You can certainly do it by invitation. But if, for example, you're looking for parents, you might want to put it out to parents in general. And then we deal with it. But typically, a group of 20, we've had as many as 60 or 70 in a group, and obviously we do it differently if that's the case. And if you anticipate that there are going to be more in a particular group, we'd appreciate knowing that in advance. And Jennifer, I can talk to you more about that as we go on. Okay? So that's another piece of work that needs to be done up front. Are there any questions up to this point, things that I've mentioned that pique your curiosity or I should be addressing? I'm giving you a lot to think about all at once, but it does work out. As we roll things out, everything fits into place. Okay, let's talk a little bit about your screening committee. I don't know, we haven't discussed whether or not you want a screening committee. The assumption is that you might want to consider a screening committee. For one thing, it makes it much easier in terms of dealing with the open meeting law. And most districts in Massachusetts that we have worked with do use a screening committee. What is a screening committee? A screening committee is actually a subcommittee of the school committee, subject to the open meeting law, just like the school committee is. Screening committee is made up of various individuals from your community that have the task not of choosing your next superintendent, but of screening candidates that they would like you to consider, the school committee consider as candidates for the superintendent farther on down the process. The screening committee is usually made up of somewhere between 12 and 18 individuals from your community. Can include teachers, administrators, community members, municipal officials, and we would recommend 2 members of your school committee, with the expectation that those 2 members would serve as the chair and the vice chair of the screening committee. We do that for a reason. We think it's important that as a school committee you remain in control of your search. That doesn't mean that you control all the decision-making, but that the school committee sees the school committee members see the search from beginning to end, so that they understand the process. They understand some of the preliminary discussions that have taken place. And frankly, we think that from the point of view of optics, I think the public wants to see you in control of your search as well. So we think that having school committee members, 2, on the screening committee is a positive thing to do, and it tends to work out, we think, really well. The one thing you have to be careful of, and why we say 2, is that you cannot have a quorum of the school committee serving on your screening committee, obviously. But you might want to think about who those 2 people will be. Your screening committee will begin its work, and again, it's on the calendar here. The first meeting of your screening committee is January 4th. So you have quite a bit of time to think about who you'd like to have on your screening committee and getting, and putting the word out and having people come on board that you approve. Screening committees are sometimes actually sworn in by your clerk. And at that point, the clerk in the swearing in also makes them aware of the open meeting law, various conflict of interest issues that you might run into and that sort of thing, which we can talk a little bit about as we go on. So another thing on your to-do list, so to speak, is to think about your screening committee, who you would like to have on your screening committee. And we've given you an example in the packet. There's a list of folks that you might want to consider.
We actually, we did a workshop over the summer where the concept of a screening committee was discussed, and we voted that we would definitely utilize the screening committee.
Great.
And we also had some ideas of some of the constituents that we'll use.
That's
Julie?
Can I just make a point? Last go-around, I think we had 13 people on the screening committee, including 1 school committee member. Our town manager at the time did serve as the chair. As it might have been implied at some point, we did not pick those names out of a hat. We did vote on those names, those participants in a public meeting. Would your firm give us some advice on how to manage that process? Because it was difficult last time. There was a lot of politics involved.
It's probably, in some ways, it's more difficult, it's the most difficult part of the search, because you're dealing with your own community members. So let me see if I can help you a little bit, and please ask me to go deeper if you need to. Let's say that you would like to have 2 teachers on your screening committee. It might be 2, it might be 4, I don't know what it's going to be. Rather than you choosing 2 teachers, or rather than having all of the teachers who are interested in being on your screening committee, let it be known to you through some sort of a letter with a resume or whatever, we would suggest that you go to the representatives of the teachers and say to the teachers, those people, we'd like 2 representative teachers from you. Would you recommend 2 teachers, please? With the understanding that you still have the right not to approve them if you think there are conflicts of some sort, or that it's not a good fit. We would suggest you do that for as many of the constituency groups as you can, because that puts the onus of the decision for participation not on you, but on the group itself that they're representing, which I think is appropriate. You might want to think about doing the same thing for your parents' groups. Now, as I understand it, you don't have an overarching parents' group, and we might want to discuss how that might work, and I'd be happy to discuss, options for you to help you through that process. But again, if you can put the decision-making for the representation in the hands of the constituent group to recommend members to you, that puts you in the position of being able to finally approve them, which is certainly within your authority. But it also takes you out of the task of choosing one community member over another. We think that's a relatively trouble-free way of doing it. And it gives, I think, some authority, if you will, to the constituency group themselves to put representatives on the screening committee that they think would do a good job for them there. So that's what I would recommend in that case. There are also positions on the screening committee that you, in fact, may wish to appoint. You may wish to appoint a municipal official, rather than have the municipal officials recommend themselves. And in that case, you may want to take that on and just say, Joe Smith has really been engaged with the district. We think, he'd make a good contribution to the process, or make many good contributions to the process. We'd like to invite him, and so you do. So I think some hybrid method of choosing can work for you, and we're happy to talk with you more about it. Questions? Sound reasonable?
In practice.
Yeah. Now, if you do have to get into a random selection of folks, for example, if there's some constituency group where you don't have an overarching organization that you can go to say, recommend someone to us, or some people to us, what you might want to do is then ask those people to apply, and then you do randomly select them. You simply put them into a bowl, and you pull out the names, and there you go. But what it does is it gets you out of the business of as much as possible, I think, gets you out of the business of having to turn some people away. I don't think that's not a task that school committees typically enjoy, I don't think.
Sure. I have another question for you. And what sort of orientation would you provide once we select or nominate or draw out of a hat that group of people to represent us? What sort of orientation do you provide for them with question development and time commitment, use of social media, keeping to executive session? I assume that these interviews would be conducted again in executive session, so maintaining the bounds of executive session.
The very first meeting that we have with the screening committee, as I mentioned, is on, January 4th? You notice that meeting is 2 to 3 hours long. Probably half of that, well, maybe even 3/4 of that meeting is an orientation. And what we do is we go through, first of all, we make it very clear, and we continue to make it clear throughout the meetings of the screening committee, that they're not choosing the next superintendent. They're there to choose 3 to 5 people to bring forth to you. And when we get down to the final, tallying, we have the conversation all over again. And we remind them, you're not choosing the next superintendent. You're choosing 5 people who can fill the bill of being a superintendent, or 3 people, whatever your direction is. So that's really one of the very first things we make clear. The other thing we make clear is that they are a subcommittee subject to the open meeting law, and we go through that with them. I suspect that your clerk will do the same thing if, in fact, you have them sworn in. But we go through, and in fact, we give them excerpts from the open meeting law itself, showing them the reason that they're going into executive session, and what that means in terms of the kinds of conversations they will have in executive session, and the kinds of conversations they will not have in executive session as well. For example, although we'll be interviewing candidates in executive session, because it is a preliminary interview for employment, we'll not be developing questions in executive session, because that's not covered under the open meeting law. That's a public meeting piece. So we take a lot of time to clarify how they have to function in open meeting law, under the open meeting law. The other piece of this that we pay a lot of attention to is the conflict of interest piece of this. And we speak with people specifically about where a conflict of interest can occur if, in fact, you are appointed by the superintendent of schools. For example, if you're a principal, the principal is appointed by the superintendent of schools, not by the school committee. Therefore, there's a potential conflict of interest, or a perceived conflict of interest, if in fact the principal does not declare that that relationship exists. So, and again, in that first meeting, we point that out, and we actually bring with us the conflict of interest filing papers for them to file with your officials here in your municipality. So we go through that as well. The other thing that we hammer away at is confidentiality. And all of you know what the importance of confidentiality in these kinds of processes. But the fact of the matter is, what they do in executive session will remain in executive session forever, unless for some reason a judge or a court decides otherwise. It will remain confidential. The conversations remain confidential, and the candidates that are interviewed who are not put forward for your consideration at the school committee level, their names never come out. We hammer away at that. It's important for the candidates, and I think you all understand, you're probably going to have sitting superintendents applying for this position. Those sitting superintendents may not have discussed this with their present employers. And so if word gets out, and obviously gets back to their school committee or school board, and they haven't spoken with them, obviously that creates problems. And it doesn't happen often, but sometimes it does. And so it's really important, and you all understand this, it's very important that we continue to, and we do, we hammer away at that. The other piece that we hammer away at is how you communicate as a board. Don't telephone one another, we don't email one another. All of your conversations are going to occur in committee, so that we don't even have the possibility that there's a breach of the open meeting law because someone emailed something to somebody and then someone else emailed it to someone else, and suddenly you've got a serial communication in place that obviously is not in compliance with the open meeting law. So, making a long story longer, I guess, we hammer away at those things, and all of those things and more are discussed, as well as the development of interview questions.
Thank you.
I have a question. All of that you do take care of during the orientation?
Yes.
Is there when we're looking to do the screening committee or fulfill, is there something that we provide to let people know the time commitment?
Yep.
So if you're going to do this, you should know this ahead of time.
I have a sample letter for you. In fact, it's in my draft file ready to email to you as the liaison tomorrow in Word.
Okay.
And what it represents is an invitation to people
Okay.
who you would like to or after they're chosen to, or when they're being considered, to let it be known what the commitment is. And in that letter is the first two meeting dates, as well as explaining the time commitment that's necessary. So we can make that available to you. And I think there's a draft of that letter in your folder, if I'm not mistaken. I can't put my hands on it at the moment, but I believe it's in there. But I have it in Word ready to go for you. Is it in there? Did you?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I guess what I mean, so this, yes, but I mean before,
We can help you
for
with
that,
that. too.
almost take, I guess we could just take some of this.
Yeah.
Just so I don't want people,
That's typically
however
what
we
you
go
do.
about it, they should know.
Well, what you would do with that letter, for example, is if you're sending it to the administrators, because you want them to choose one or two people, you'd send that to the lead person of the administrative group, and then they would discuss that. But we can work it any way you want. It's basically the same language. Okay?
Great, thank you.
Sure. So, we now are working with the screening committee. The screening committee is doing its work. It will meet beginning in January. It will continue meeting until mid-January to the third week. It will then narrow down the candidates that it wishes to pass on to you folks. At that point, the candidates would be announced to you alphabetically, usually in a public meeting, usually by the chair or someone designated to make the announcement publicly to the public and to the school committee. The 5 names, or 3 names would be listed in alphabetical order with an explanation of where they come from, where they're working, that sort of thing. From that point on, the search is done completely in the open. All of your questions, your interviews, the visits, all of that is done in full public view, in compliance with the open meeting law. The only piece that probably won't be in open public session is when you actually negotiate the contract, which can be done behind closed doors. All of that fitting together, now when it comes to the school committee and your work, you will then need to be thinking about, and this is in the January-February timeframe, you will need to be thinking about your interview process, developing interview questions, which we can help you with, the process itself, where you're going to meet, and how you're going to arrange the interviews and potential visits to the district. Typically, what's done is a candidate will come into the district for a day, spend a day in the district for some period of time, maybe have lunch with the administrators or another group, and then in that evening, interview with the school committee. That's how it's typically done. It doesn't have to be done that way. Some school committees interview all the candidates in a couple of evenings and then invite, as a result of those interviews, invite candidates back that they want to see again. It can vary, and we can talk about that as you get there. But you want to be thinking about, how you'd like this to play out. There is also typically an opportunity for candidates to meet with the public before any appointment is made, so that you can see how they interact with your public, see how they interact with school personnel and that sort of thing. Then you may wish to visit the candidate's present school district, assuming that they're working in a school district. So if someone is in a district in New York, for example, you may decide that you want to send a couple of people down to that district to actually talk to people in that district. We make all of those arrangements for you. Then you can either, you can do that. Some school committees now are not doing the visits to the districts, but rather asking us to give them the names and contacts of references that we think you folks should be talking to directly. And we will do that anyway. During this process, once the names become public, we start going into references. And we start contacting references, and we go beyond the references that are given to us down to other levels, obviously. As we're doing our reference checks, we're noting people that have something interesting to say about a particular candidate. And what we will then do, if you wish, is we will pass that contact information on to you and say, if you're considering this candidate seriously, these are people you ought to talk to learn about that candidate's strengths and areas that they're working on, that sort of thing. So that can be done, as well as visiting their work sites, and we can talk to you about that as we get closer to the time. Mr. Chairman, you have a question over here, I believe.
I think I asked you this when you were here last time, talking to us. How critical is it that we visit the districts?
I think it's becoming less so, particularly if we can give you a way of getting inside information on the candidates without making the visits. For one thing, the visits take time, which means you elongate your search. And the other thing that nobody likes to hear this, but my guess is you'll be competing against other searches. So you want to expedite things to your advantage as best you can. You don't want to make decisions in a vacuum, certainly, but if we can give you references that we think can really give you the inside scoop that you need on these candidates to make good decisions, that frequently takes the place of the visits, and more so, also because people are busy. And it's very difficult to take the time to, I mean, if you visit a candidate, it's a whole day.
And I think that's something we need to talk about. Being involved in this last time, looking back, I didn't see a lot of positive
Yeah,
in going to the district. As a matter of fact, I saw it as a negative.
we hear that a lot. We're hearing that more and more.
I'd also say that I think it's, unless the same committee members visit each
Right.
district, I think it's natural that you become biased to the particular
Correct.
superintendent candidate that you visited.
And they felt staged, and I think I said that before.
Yeah, we hear that a lot. So more and more, the school districts are not, school committees are not doing it. And I think if you were to talk to the committees, they find having references that they can call that can really give you the information you're looking for, turns out to be very effective. So, but you can talk more about that, and we're happy to accommodate you either way.
Jen, did you have something? I saw you.
No, I was going to say what you said, that if we decide, I think part of the problem that I've heard, I wasn't there, but was that there were different school committee members visiting different sites, and so then everyone sort of felt a little bit more connected to one in particular. So if we were going to do it, it makes sense to have the same people
And it
visiting
becomes a
each
timing
district.
issue. The reason why that was not.
Because it was so much time, right.
Sure.
Yeah.
We can talk more about that whenever you're ready, if, you know. And the other thing I want to mention, we can come back and talk to you as a committee anytime you wish. You know, of the 3 or 4 of us that'll be working in the field, we'll get someone here to speak with you if you need us. So that, having gone through all of that process, at some point in February, you'll be ready to make your final decision. You will do your deliberations in public. You will have to, and we can help you with this, you'll converse about the candidates. We'll give you some suggestions about the kinds of things that you might want to say and the kinds of things that you don't want to say, obviously in a public meeting, and, you know, you're all experienced and I think have a handle on that anyway, but we're happy to help there as well. And at the end of the process, after your deliberations, you will take a vote. We would suggest that the vote not be to appoint, but to enter into contract negotiations. And then pending successful contract negotiations, you get a contract signed, you appoint, and you're ready to go. Then we can also talk with you about a transition period where your new superintendent becomes available to you from March through June, for example. And you might want to schedule some times when he or she goes through the buildings, talks with teachers, talks with community members, sits with you, sits in on your school committee meeting perhaps to see how you function, that sort of thing. And all of that we can help you with as well. Okay? Last few items to discuss with you. We'd suggest to you that you consider what your contract, your new contract is going to look like. It may be the same as you've had for years. There may be things in there that you want to change based upon your experience. If you wish, we can give you some things to think about. You probably will want to bring your attorney in on that if you are changing things, or maybe even if you're not changing things. You might want to bring your attorney in on that review of your contract. Typical contract is 3 to 5 years. You know, we would suggest that you be thinking in those terms. The other thing that we would suggest you take a look at is your job description. It's entirely possible that your experience has led you to think that you need some changes in your job description. Better to do that ahead of your appointment than do it close to or after you've appointed your new superintendent. So we would suggest that that might be a piece of work that you'd want to take a look at. We can help you with that as well.
May I just ask you real quick?
Sure.
You mentioned that before, sometime before appointment. Would that be part of the candidate's interest level in our district, though?
Could be.
Is that something we want to do sooner rather than later?
If some districts do, some districts don't. But if you have a document that you feel comfortable with, or that can be easily revised to be updated, we'd be delighted with that. We don't always get one, but that would be terrific if you can do it. Yeah. At some point, prior to your decision for finalists, you ought to, it wouldn't be public, but you ought to have your contract firm so that you know what it is you want in your contract. Now, it's entirely possible that what you want and what the candidate wants are two different things. That's what negotiations are for. But nevertheless, it should be clear in your minds as to where you want to be, okay? The other thing that you would want to discuss, and this, I think, also can be discussed in relation to the informational letter and our outreach and advertising, is your salary level. Now, it's fairly common not to put a salary range in your outreach materials, but rather to say regionally competitive. So in the letter, we've actually put that language in. If you do want a range or you want to change that in some way, then that would be something to do fairly soon. There will come a point down the road, not too far down the road, when we will ask you to privately give us what you think your salary range was going to be. The reason for that is when we talk to candidates, we don't give out any ranges, but we ask them what their requirements are. And in this process, there is what's called an agreement in principle, which means when you get to your finalist stage, we talk with each candidate, and we determine whether or not you can land that candidate. And part of that is obviously the salary that they're looking for, any of the fringes that they're looking for, and other things that might enter into negotiations. If we think that everything is fine, we'll tell you that. And it's not 100% perfect because sometimes we're not negotiating with them, so sometimes they don't always tell us everything we need to know. But if we determine that there are problems, we'll let you know that as well. So that we'll say, we think you've got an issue here that you're going to have to work through if in fact you want to land this candidate. So we will help you with that process as well. And then the other thing that we will do, with your permission, we would like to link our website to your website, so that when someone comes and picks up the application or looks at our website inquiring about the position, there'll be a link to your site so that they can go to your site and learn about your district. The other thing that you may want to do when we get there is to put the candidate profile on your district so your community can see it, and so candidates can see it as well when they visit your district. I've given an awful lot to think about. I feel so bad doing this for committees because it's a lot to think about all at once. But the process does work. We're there at every step of the way to help you. If you have questions, please call. If you think you need assistance with something, please call. If you need us to come back and help you work through something, let us know that. We're here to help you, and in the end, you will find that everything fits together really well. And in the end, when everything goes well, hopefully you're going to get the superintendent that you're looking for to bring your district into the future.
Could I just ask you to repeat all that starting from the beginning?
Sure. I've got the time if you have.
I just have one thing I just wanted to, I don't know if we discuss it now or later, was the publication online, the different sites that we spoke about, Top Job.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
I want to make sure that was addressed.
In what we've done, what we always do is we have our own outreach. Thank you for reminding me, Tom, I appreciate that. We have our own outreach mechanisms, which means we have our own network that we communicate with, both in hard copy and electronically. We also have several bulletin boards that we access to put the word out in various other parts of the country and, at the college level, college, university level, and so on. Part part of your contract, there, in the back of your contract, there's an optional piece for fee-based advertising. So let me just describe that for you. It's not included in the contract price. I'm not saying that you need it, but some districts like to do it. And I can tell you what typically appeals to other districts in this process. There is the electronic version of the electronic version of Education Week, which is Top School Jobs. Education Week, for those of you that are educators, you would know it. It's sort of the clearinghouse for professional educators nationally. They have a hard copy version, and they have a bulletin board. To put an announcement of your opening on their board for about 30 days of exposure is $410, is that right? Am I reading that?
$395.
$395 for 30 days worth of exposure. The other outlet that you might want to think about is AASA, the American Association of School Administrators, which is very popular among administrators, particularly superintendents. You can have an announcement placed on their website for $410? $410, okay, I can never remember the numbers. You may want to consider both of those. You can also do a hard copy advertisement, if you wish, in Education Week, which is the newspaper that I referred to just a few seconds ago. The exposure's for a week, roughly, and it tends to be considerably more expensive. You're talking about close to a couple of $1,000s for doing that. Although we think, Education Week and the hard copy is a great publication, and we're certainly supportive of everything we do, we're not sure that for your purposes, a hard copy advertisement is what you're looking for. But if you wish it, we can do it. But we would suggest that you consider the AASA and the Top School Jobs as two very effective ways of getting the word out. There's no markup for us. It's billed straight through to the school district at the prices that were $395 for one and $410 for the other. So you might want to let us know how you feel about that.
I certainly think that while cost is a factor, I certainly don't think we want to be penny wise and pound foolish. I think we want to make sure we have the most effective search that we can. Your recent searches that were completed successfully, how many of those utilize those extra advertising?
Virtually,
venues?
The larger districts, almost all of them. Yeah, the smaller districts, perhaps not so much, but by larger, 4,000 students, 5,000 students, most of them would choose to use those two, AASA and Top School Jobs. Yeah.
Oh, when I asked you about which is the more effective of the two.
You're asking me to publicly choose between two different decisions. I'd rather not do that, but, they're either one or both is fine. I think they're both pretty effective. Keep in mind that we also have our own electronic network, so that if you choose not to do this, that's fine. We'll be fine with that. But if you want that extra nudge, so to speak, on the national basis, those would be two ways to do it.
Let me ask you this, out of the last 2 years, let's say, of your successful searches, how many candidates were chosen outside of New England?
Oh, I'd have to think of a number, and I want to be careful. I would say most of the candidates that apply and most of the candidates that are chosen come out of the New England area. But I can tell you that there are some notable exceptions. There's one search we did 2-3 years ago. The associate superintendent out of DC was selected. We did a search down in Rhode Island where a candidate out of Florida was selected. And in fact, I got a call from Florida not too long ago for one of our searches. We had, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we had a superintendent was selected out of Ohio. So it happens, yeah. But because you're New England, and because New England is sort of a catchment area unto itself, and the culture of New England is different in a lot of ways than other parts of the country. most of your candidates will probably come from New England, probably also out of New York and New Jersey, because we recruit heavily in New York and New Jersey, and we also recruit in Pennsylvania, so we would expect some from there as well.
When would you need a decision on the advertising costs?
Within the next few days, when we get the word out, within the next week or so, if you can do that.
All right, well, we can't deliberate outside of a public meeting, and I think we probably need to make that decision tonight then, right?
Well, when's your next meeting?
Not for 2 weeks.
2 weeks? I could do it in 2, if that fits your schedule, we can do that.
Let me ask, are we prepared to vote on this tonight, or do we want some time to mull this over?
Do you have
Jen?
a question? And I have something to say.
Yeah, I have two questions. One is, do you utilize School Spring? Did we discuss that?
That's in your contract?
That's in
It's
our
no
contract?
cost,
Okay,
yeah.
that's what I
Yeah.
thought. And I guess this would give us a good segue. What is the big picture? What are we paying for your services?
It's on the
Okay, I know that there was
last
a
page of the agreement.
There was a negotiation the other night. What's
So
the bottom line?
The bottom line is the total, unless we wanted to remove, one of the areas that we could negotiate would be the number of focus groups, and that would save us $365 per group if we wanted to downsize the focus groups. The other areas were not.
Not unless there are
Negotiable.
things you can do yourselves there. I mean, if you go through it and I really can't think of much you'd want to take on yourselves.
We went through each piece and said, would we be able to do this ourselves? And Tom and I thought that we felt better to let NESDEC do this with their more experience. But if there's something, but we didn't make any decision, we didn't sign that night because we wanted to bring it back and have us look through it and just say, is there anything that someone says, no, I don't want to pay for that, I can do that? Then I think we're happy. Tom and I felt as though we were comfortable letting NESDEC do this. The only thing we did talk about was the focus groups, because 6, when we were naming the numbers, we actually came up with 5 and said, well, maybe we don't need, but then we thought, $300, $365, is that enough to change the overall cost of $17,460? It would bring us just a little over $17,000. The other piece, of course, was the extra. I think the top school jobs sounds like a good additional cost of $395, but I think we can probably, I don't know what other people think. It seems, for me, it's very popular, and I know a lot of people look there for
Are we
their
getting
jobs.
mostly out-of-state applicants with those services?
No, well, I don't know if
I mean,
mostly, it
are
is.
New England applicants going to see that before they see the other ways wherever?
No, the New England
So-
applicants would probably get it. Most people come to us. Most people get it through us. We asked that question in the application process, where did they find out?
So
And
I
those
guess-
find out from our website.
I guess my question is, what additional candidates would we get from those services?
Well, you're going to love this answer, but, it could be the one you're looking for. That's what you don't know. That's what you don't know.
Dollars.
Yeah, so it's hard to say. It's hard to say. Also want to say that if you want to reduce the number of focus groups, that's fine. We can certainly do that. But we're also saying to you, and I said this before, if you want a couple more focus groups, we're not going to charge you additionally for those. We don't get into that. So we want to fit your needs. But if you think you want to reduce the number of focus groups, we can certainly do that.
Julie, Manny, how many focus groups did we do last time? Do you remember?
I will say that I don't remember them as being as successful and well-attended as we had hoped. As much as we hear that people want to be involved in the process, and you try to be creative with scheduling, maybe a morning or an evening or a weekend, bottom line is you get a few people that show up, and then that's it.
You're absolutely right.
So I think we make every attempt. We put our full force effort into getting people to come and share. And I know that we did it separately for community members, including parents. We did some for building-based, and the attendance was not as strong as we had
I don't think we
hoped.
had more than 2 or 3. I don't remember having more
I
than
think
that.
I think we had 3.
A little bit more than that, a
Yeah.
little bit more than that,
3 focus groups?
yeah.
Yeah.
Not 3 people who came.
Right.
I was like, oh
That
my
would've been really
goodness,
poor.
that's really
No,
not good.
I think what Mrs. Broussard
Broussard, yeah.
says is right. I mean, and that's one of the reasons why we do a web-based survey, because that's
Yeah.
one of the ways of getting out there. So The problem with the survey is that you don't get the depth of response that you get with
Right,
a
a
focus group.
face-to-face, right.
But attracting people to focus groups is difficult. And,
Right.
we've done focus groups of one person.
Yeah,
So you might want to think about that in terms of, maybe you want to offer one for parents and one for administrators and one for teachers and leave it at that. That's fine as well, and we can credit you. The only thing we ask that you don't do is you don't change your mind while our consultant is in the district, because we have to pay the consultant
right,
to be
get
here.
right.
So, if you
Understandable.
tell us in advance and we schedule it, then that's the way we can go. So we're flexible on that.
The one thing, sorry to interrupt, the one thing I can say is this time might be a little bit different, circumstances different,
Yeah, perhaps.
and I think you may have more people that are
You might.
really want to get involved, you would hope.
I'm hopeful.
The other thing I
I
didn't,
mean, if you look at that workshop that we had a pretty good turnout. And if you look at that interest level within that workshop, and you transfer that to a focus group, you may get a better,
Let's be optimistic.
you would hope, right?
Let's be optimistic.
well, you can play with that. I mean, we've got time to think about that, a little time to think about that. Carolyn will probably be in touch with you, Jennifer, to talk about the groups and how many and when they're scheduled. And then she'll help you through that process as well. The other thing I neglected to mention, I apologize, in addition to the focus groups and the web-based survey, we also will interview individually people that you put us in touch with. So, for example, if you wanted us to interview some of your municipal officials, it's usually done by telephone because that's the way they like to do it. But we can give them a call. What we usually do is send out an email invitation to them saying, if you'd like to speak to us, call us, and we talk to them on the phone. And that is also brought into the information that we bring back to you when we talk to you about the candidate profile. So that's another way, that might be a way of you reducing your focus groups if you wished. If you wanted us to speak to people on your finance committee or, some other constituencies that you may have. Your chief of police. So that is it, unless there are questions, and as I said, we're happy to answer questions as we go along as well.
Any further questions, comments? All right, well, we've got a lot of work ahead of us. We appreciate this comprehensive orientation, Art, really, some great information, a lot to mull over and a lot to start working on. I would suggest that perhaps each of us think about compositions of focus groups and composition of screening committee, and perhaps at our next meeting, we can discuss that.
Just a question, do we have to sign something to get the ball rolling, and do we have to vote on that?
Yeah, we'll have to decide, didn't we vote on this? We did vote on this, didn't we? Yeah, we voted to select NASDAQ, yeah.
Okay, 'cause I know that he has a contract that, just to,
Yeah, I'm not signing nothing.
no.
Yeah, we will take care of that.
We're ready to go. We'll send you a contract, but
Okay.
we think we're ready to go.
Yes,
We trust that everything's fine.
Thank you again.
We're done? You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Good luck to you all. It's great seeing you again,
Thank you.
and we'll be talking to you.
Drive safely.
All right, moving on to our next item of business. So, all right, bear with me 1 second while I get organized. So, our negotiating team came to terms with our cafeteria workers, and as in our last executive session, we reviewed and went over the contract. We now need to, in public session, ratify that. So I would accept the motion to move to approve the negotiated agreement between the Wilmington School Committee and the Wilmington School Cafeteria Employees Association dated July 1st, 2017 to July 30, 2020. Do I have a motion? Julie? And second by Peggy. All those in favor? That is unanimous. All right, we're also on our second reading of school district wellness program policy. Just so that the public knows, school committee policy is to have a first and then a second reading of all policy changes, so that after the first reading, members can continue to digest the material. So we are on our second reading of the school district wellness program policy. I would accept a motion to approve if that was offered. By Manny, second. By Tom. All those, any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. All right, also second reading of the procurement requirement policy. Do I have a motion to approve? Jen, and second by Peggy. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor? That is unanimous. We also have, at this point, a deletion for a policy DJG, which is vendor relations. And the reason for this deletion, Paul, if you correct me if I'm wrong, is because it's redundant now? Redundant now with the, with those two policies we just approved. So deletions are not necessarily covered by our policy, so we can do a first reading and vote to approve if that is the will of the board. Does anyone have any problems with that? All right, you all had it in the packets, hopefully you were able to read it. All right, so if that's the case, I would accept a motion to approve the first reading deletion of policy DJG, vendor relations. By Tom, second by Julie. All those in favor? That is also unanimous. All right, now our next order of business is a personnel report. Paul?
Thank you. In your packet, you have a personnel report as of October 25th. This just shows changes since the last time we presented this, which was mid to late September. So as we go through the course of the year, this will dwindle more and more, so.
Yes, Peggy?
Can I just ask a question? I don't see it on here, and I don't know if we're still looking, because it's probably hard to find, but we still have an opening in the middle school for the technology?
Tech ed?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're still, we thought we had someone, but we didn't, so we're still looking for that position. That's somewhat difficult to fill. We have a sub in there, but to bring someone on board, we're having a little bit of difficulty.
I didn't know if we were still actively looking for that particular type of teacher.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Anything else? Anyone else? All right, this is informational. It does not require a vote. All right. Paul, would you take us through the FY17 financial report?
Thank you, yes. So what you have in front of you, or in your packet, is the final FY17 financial report. As you can see, we ended the year with a, in the black of $7,046.29. Given the challenging year we went through, I think it's a great accomplishment, and it's really due to the collective efforts of the entire Wilmington Public Schools community. And we all had to work together. I don't have to tell you what kind of went on, but we all banded together and did what we had to do, from teachers, support staff, administrators, everyone working together. We were able to come out in the black for the fiscal year, so very proud of the work of everyone.
I think you should be proud, Paul. Once again, you put us in the black. You and the whole district kept us in the black under a challenging situation. So kudos to you and to everyone else. Are there any questions, comments by the membership? Yes, Peggy.
I'll just say I agree with you. I think that we're very lucky to have Paul in this position doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Jackie,
Absolutely,
his
Jackie.
second in command.
I should say Jackie first.
All right. And our next order of business, our one-to-one Chromebook update. Paul, would you like to take us, to start us out on this?
Yeah, in your packet, there's a package for the one-to-one Chromebook initiative that Assistant Superintendent Gallagher put together. Mr. Gallagher, do you have any comments, or you want just to answer questions?
I mean, to save time, we also have a PowerPoint, but I've also provided you a PowerPoint with the overall of the program. So and I could just talk through this, or if you want me to go up there, it's up to you.
Well, how's the board feel? Because I'd certainly like to get some, the minimum, some bullet points.
Okay.
Do you want to put it up and run through it?
It's up to you guys.
Does that make it easier for you?
Yeah, either way, I'm ready to go.
All right.
All right.
Maybe we start this way. Has everyone, does everyone have?
I can go through what you have.
I mean, I'm okay with this.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Okay with this.
There you go. So, obviously, I think the success of the Chromebook program and initiative, I think, before I got here, I think a lot of hard work went into this program. What's great, I think, about our Chromebook program is, first of all, we partner with families, Wilmington families, to provide that valuable learning tool. Also creating a sustainable model. You know, if you look around the Commonwealth, there's a lot of districts that as they were developing a one-to-one or bringing technology into the classroom, they kind of jumped ahead of the process, and they didn't really look at its sustainability. And I think Wilmington did a wonderful job before I got here of making sure that this model is going to be sustainable. We also offer, as you all know, financial assistance for families that that struggle with financing a Chromebook, and then also for the students that do not have technology throughout the school day. We provide viable options for all students throughout the day. So there isn't a student that comes to Wilmington Public Schools without access, especially in those grades, grade 8, 9, and 10, without technology. As you all know, we're a Chromebook in Google Classroom or Google District. So this is a big piece of, I think, all of us, and one of, I think, the really important aspect is by utilizing Google Classroom as a district, you have the same platform. So from teacher to teacher, from school to school, I think that's something that's really, really important that we're going to continue to enhance. So people are familiar with that one platform at home when the students are, doing their work and, utilizing the use of technology. And I think it's really important to understand that technology never replaces great teaching. So there's a lot of wonderful teachers and learning that's going on in the classroom. Technologies can really enhance the curriculum for teachers and really bring us to that 21st century learning aspect of what we're trying to do. And I think the shift, and I'll be presenting the MCAS on November 8th, but the shift is really college and career readiness, and really looking at curriculum in focus, almost like a backwards design. So when our students graduate at grade 12, what are the skills that they're going to need to be successful in the workforce and in college, if they choose? For us, when we were looking at that, when we were going through school, the world is vastly different. And I think what we're trying to do in the classroom is, it's extraordinary work that's going on for our teachers. We're actually shifting from a traditional setting to more 21st century learning. And this, I think our Chromebook program is really the great equalizer of having our Wilmington students prepared when they graduate. So as we start to look at curriculum, as we start to prepare our students from pre-K to 12, I think that's the big picture for all of us. If I'm a first grader or a first grade teacher, what is my role in getting our students, when they're seniors, giving them the life experiences that they're gonna be successful. In 5 years from now, that could look a lot different than today, as we all know. Technology and the world is changing fast and furious. But I think we have the platform and also the starting point of really making a difference. And I just want to credit, the teachers. The other aspect of our Chromebook program is the willingness of administrators and teachers to reflect and to really start to change the way they're working with our students. So, and that's our job also as assistant superintendent in central office, to really provide the quality professional development for our teachers. And that's something that we've been doing. We started that in the summertime with a focus, and really looking at content specific, bringing in teachers from other districts that are working with our teachers in how to incorporate some of those skills. And then we'll also be doing that once again on November 7th at the middle school and the high school. So we're excited about that. I think the nice picture of the success of the program is when you look at the grade level updates. And remember, what's wonderful about our program is if students came in September or October and did not have a Chromebook device, they can always work, with central office. They can work with our technology, so they can always purchase down the road. And I think that, from our numbers from the beginning of the school year to now, you can see how successful it is, students participating in the Chromebook program. So in 8th grade, we have 95%. We have 9 students that are using other devices that are bringing into schools. And then right now, we have 7 students that are using the loaner program in 8th grade. For 9th grade, we're at 97% of the students participating in the Chromebook program. We have 4 students in that freshman class that are using other devices, and then 2 students at this time utilizing the loaner program. And then in 10th grade, it's similar, 97%, 5 students using other devices, and 2 students using the loaners program. So these numbers could change, in the sense of some of the students that are in the loaner program now, they have an opportunity, to become part of the Chromebook initiative, or if they have their own devices. And I think that that's also what's unique in utilizing Google Classroom, is because you can access that application using multiple devices. So I think that's a very positive aspect of our program. And as I said, the keys to success: effective tech support. I can't say enough about Julie Kelly and Trish Volpe and Dana Burnham and all the work that they're doing, and Nathan working on the network, especially if we run into glitches, just a team effort. And once again, inspired staff, faculty, and administration with a big vision for the district. And the ongoing development, professional development, is extremely important. And then also supportive families and students. And then the accessible part of the loaner program. So I think all of those ingredients are essential for success. And thus far, it's been a pretty successful program. So for the students, what's really nice to see is when you're visiting classrooms, even at all levels, you're seeing the use of technology in the classroom, and the students beginning to incorporate those 21st century learning skills that we've talked about a lot, or I've had a lot of opportunities. And that's, the collaboration, the innovation, the creativity, that aspect of education that we're pushing our students to do, and really tying in what they're learning in the classroom to the real world. Our students are adhering to the acceptable use policy. We don't have, knock on wood, or plastic, we don't have a lot of students violating the acceptable use policy, and when there is an issue with that, the administration and the teachers recognize that quick, and we deal with the students and the families. And then technology support is reporting that the students are maintaining their Chromebooks. There's not a lot of damage to the Chromebooks themselves. And the students, as we said, continue to work within the rules. I've also provided you the overall packet that the parents get. I'm not gonna obviously go through all of this, but what we'd like to do this year, and as I'm coming in to my second year here, is really get the word out to parents in January. We're looking to mail out some information with the report cards in January, so all the parents will receive it. Mid-February, we would like to jump ahead of this a little bit. Last year was a little bit late, but, you know, we handled it. For the Chromebook program overview for the Wilmington families, and the ongoing program registration for current 6th and 7th students and families. The week of August, we'll continue to do our Chromebook imaging like we've always have done, and I think we're in great shape. Once again, I just wanted to recognize the hard work of Trish Volpe, Dana Burnham, Julie Kelly, Mr. Kevin Welch, and Miss Linda Peters, who have been extremely supportive of the Chromebook initiative. So I think as we are looking at what's a positive to put on, you know, in that of something that's special about Wilmington, this is extremely impressive of what's going on with our one-to-one Chromebook program. So that's my quick little summary for you all.
I found it interesting that that there's a lot less damage.
Yeah.
And this is, I'm sure, unfair to ask you off the top of your head, but do you have any idea what the percentage is of parents who bought insurance?
I don't know that. That was a good question, but.
But that's good news. They're tougher, either they're tougher or the students
Right.
are being more careful with them.
Well, and I think that, you know, just from my experience, my previous experience with laptops and now my experience here with Chromebooks, one of the big concerns is as you were rolling out a program like this is, you know, parents, I was a parent too, like, you know, my son and my daughter, they leave their notebook, you know, at the, you know, playground, and what are they gonna, now they're gonna have this device, but what really, that we see with students is it becomes essential to their learning, and what you start to see is accountability and responsibility for the device itself. That's been a really positive piece. And remember, if there is a device that is damaged or is not functioning, they bring it to the tech center for both schools, and they get a loaner until that one gets refurbished or fixed. So that's kind of the check-in and out. So talking to Julie Kelly and Trish and Dana and Nathan, that's been one positive, is the students are very responsible and careful.
I'm sorry, Peggy, you had something first?
I did, okay. I'll just segue into that. You weren't here when we did the laptops. For over a period of years, we spent a lot of money on laptops. And when we brought in this program, I think there were still laptops around. So I want to know, what are we doing with those? Do we still have them? Are we using them for lower class grades, or what are we doing with those?
So I know those old laptops were in the 8th grade and 7th grade down at the middle school. And I think we've used them, got the most out of them, but they're becoming now obsolete. And I think there is a part of the budget where we refurbish them, or I'm not
Some
sure.
replacement of those.
Yeah,
Even
replacement.
we have tablets that are
Right.
old, they're still usable, so some of the schools are using them in classrooms as well, at the lower elementary levels.
Right.
and
So we
forth.
manage the ones, but eventually those old laptops, you know, and that's what's great about this program, is it's extremely sustainable.
Well, are we using laptop carts for any of the Chromebooks?
Yes.
And so if some break and the teachers don't have enough and they don't use them, is there a process for them to get those back up to working condition?
For the ones that are in the carts?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, all
Mhm.
right.
So we have, so because you have now grade 8, 9, and 10,
All right,
so last year's carts, you only had one grade, so they were being utilized a lot. But now, because you have those 3 grades, you have more accessibility at the lower grade. So there's more carts available to grades 6 and 7.
Good, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And then next year, we'll have grades, you'll have 2 more grades online, and then we may be able to move some of the carts down to the elementary school.
Okay, great, thank you.
Tom?
I noticed you mentioned the scholarships. Where does that money come from?
So we have, I think, financial assistance, and when a family, is in need, there's certain documents that they fill out, and they'll bring those documents to central office. So I think there's probably a contingency fund within our technology budget.
As an example, last meeting, I had mentioned that Dunkin' Donuts had made a donation of $5,000 that I'm going to pick up next week. But that's to purchase approximately 20, we can get about 20 Chromebooks for that. So we'll, replace them out, or if some Chromebook gets damaged, there is a fee, because we'll actually, like Julie Kelly, for instance, I think she gets her screwdrivers out and she replaces screens and different things. So we have a revolving account that we set up last year, school committee approved. So any revenue, if you will, this donation would go in there, and we use that to kind of fund. And the scholarships, they could, the device is roughly, it's a little less, but $250 just around it.
I think it's 205 or.
Yeah, I'm just rounding to 250. It's kind of, it's in that, if you get insurance and everything else.
Yeah.
So it's a scholarship, we half off that, costs us $125 roughly.
Yeah.
And so forth. And we have, additional Chromebooks in inventory, if you will, as for loaners and so forth, so.
Okay.
Yes, Jen?
I was just wondering, the other devices that the students are using, are they mostly laptops? Or is anyone using iPad? Are they using phones?
Yeah.
What are you seeing?
Not the phones, no. It's more like, Apple and more of a laptop, but they're not using phones
They're
yet.
definitely not using phones. Okay, just checking. Because, some people think, they actually will try and pull their readings up on their phone, and so that can just be
Right.
problematic, I think, for
Well,
middle
I think with
schoolers.
the advancement with technology and, in the next 4 or 5 years, we may be seeing, different devices that are going to be used. But that's, if you look at the whole process of devices and the use of technology, if you remember, 6 years ago or 7 years ago, like Apple only worked with this, and then you'd have the PC would only work with this, and they didn't talk. But now that you have the cloud, where almost any device connects to that, and so you start to really change and adapt. So I just think it's just a great equalizer when you can bring the use of technology in the classroom, and the teachers have the ability to enhance the curriculum they're already teaching. And as we always say, it never replaces great teachers. Those people are still there in the classroom, but it just really helps to bring that curriculum to a true 21st century learning platform.
This reminds me of the fact that, if I'm still correct on this, our policy says there aren't supposed to be any phones in the middle school. Is that right? Is that still our policy? Do we remember?
I don't know.
We never put them into the middle school as the school committee. And we all know that they're over there and they're causing all kinds of issues. So I'm thinking that we need to have another meeting of the policy subcommittee, maybe relook at that and find a way that if we still agree that they shouldn't be there for the middle school, the kids are too young and they're too irresponsible with what's going on with those telephones, that maybe there's something we can put in our policy to work that out somehow. But
Maybe a simple fix is similar to what I've seen in a lot of the high school classrooms. They have the little slots with the numbers, and as the kids go into their classroom, they deposit their phone into their slot. I would think that would be a simple fix that we could transition down to the middle school and stick to the practice.
Yeah.
I think it's happening at the high school where they have to set it aside for the classroom period.
I think we have to decide too, how as a committee, because this is a different committee from the one who made that the original policy, So I think we need to think as a committee at this point, how do we feel about the use down there and what's going on? And do we think there are other ways? But I love that one, but.
I was just gonna suggest that when you look at the student handbooks, there's usually, rules for, cell phone use in there, so.
Right, yeah.
People are communicating, especially at the high school, it's really teacher's discretion, but there is those little pockets, because for some, for some of the activities, if we're going, let's say we're measuring shadows from the flagpole down in physics, or we're measuring, so a lot of the students will use the phones to either take pictures of that, take videos of that, and then incorporate them into a project. So a lot of times, when you're looking at teachers, it's usually teachers' discretion if they're gonna be utilizing them for, school-based instruction versus recreation. And if they're utilizing a cell phone that's being disruptive, then there's usually within the handbook, teacher or the administration will deal with it, so. But it's usually articulated in the handbooks too.
It is, but I think it's articulated there, whether it's looked at or not is another
Right,
question.
that's a whole nother
That's the whole thing.
discussion.
I just have one more question about the results. So students are doing well, incorporating 21st century learning skills into their assignments, and so you mentioned observation. Are we collecting other kinds of data to show that this is working, or are we going to start collecting other types of data?
Yeah, I think I think you always have the observation data that when you're walking into classrooms that you see in a lot of the projects, and if you remember some of the presentations the students did last year. But yeah, I think it's really looking at those formative and those summative assessments. So if you're looking at project-based learning, where technology is going to be incorporated, you're going to see that. As a parent, you'll also see, this was, for me, if I put my parent hat on, I would be hearing, my daughters talking, and I'm thinking, they're talking about other things other than school, but they're FaceTiming each other and talking about homework assignments, which in the last 5 years has totally revolutionized education because our students are FaceTiming. So I think as parents, you also see the use of technology. And I think that as we move forward into the next few years, it ends up becoming part of maybe a teacher's goal or a professional practice goal, that the use of technology will be incorporated within the classroom instruction, and then you start to monitor it that way. I think right now, as we're moving in the right direction, and now you have 3 grades that are utilizing technology, I think it's looking at the process, looking at how it's going to be fitting into the curriculum, training our teachers, and then eventually you probably be able to monitor with some sort of data on how much technology is being utilized. But I think for all of us, there are some teachers right now that are very comfortable in tech savvy, while some other teachers need a little more professional development. So you're always going to have that until we get everyone caught up. And I think, that falls back on us or myself and the superintendent of creating quality professional development that teachers start to feel a lot more comfortable of, incorporating technology.
And then they can get on Google.
Then, Peggy's on the homework committee, we're gonna put her on Google, she says, I'm not doing it, so.
It didn't happen
If
yet.
we can have, it didn't happen yet, we'll get there, so this could be a success story.
I was just
So.
thinking, listening to you, that if I hadn't already been retired at this point, I would have to retire. Schools.
No, you wouldn't.
And I love it. I love seeing the kids
Yeah.
and how excited they are.
Right.
And the homework from 2 different grade levels and what the teachers are doing with it.
Right.
It's just shame on me for being nervous about it, but they're doing a great job.
We're gonna make you a Google expert by the end of this year.
All right, then I
That's
have to
in-
come
that's
and
in
do
my
one
SMART goal.
Google to the
Yeah.
school committee.
Tom, you got something?
Thank you.
Yeah, I just was wondering, I'm guessing that there must be some type of a class or some information session for the kids on responsibilities of computer,
yeah.
because I know that parents have to sign like a contract of some of responsibility, but, you know, the kids would definitely need some kind of, you know, session of what's acceptable.
It's built into a lot of our technology courses. We're utilizing Everfi, which is a free online curriculum. And there's a whole segment on the use of technology, appropriateness, you know, cyberbullying that's being incorporated. Julie Kelly, I think, presented that last year as part of the freshman orientation towards the use of technology. But I think it's, I mean, that has to be, as we continue to evolve with the use of technology, that has to be the forefront of educating the students, because, you know, as great as technology is, there's also, you know, some side effects too that we gotta make sure that everyone's up to speed on, because there can be some ramifications for students too, and safety and all of that. It's a good, nice balancing act there, but yes.
Anything else? Sean, thank you for that update.
All right,
Thank you for
you're
that great
welcome.
news. All right, that completes our scheduled business. We now accept any public comments. Anyone from the audience wish to speak on anything that appeared on the agenda? All right, seeing none, I'll move on to subcommittee reports. Does anybody have anything to report? All right, seeing none. Correspondence, we have no correspondence
No, we
tonight.
do, hello,
Oh,
sorry.
Mike's, all right.
Yeah, I had it to bring to MJ, but she's not here, so. I've
Thank
had
you,
this for
Peggy.
a while, and I'm sorry, but
That's right.
this is a thank you. Dear school committee, thank you all so much for such a thoughtful baby gift. The clothes are adorable. It was such a nice surprise to receive the package from you. I really appreciate it. I hope everyone's year is off to a great start, and we'll see you soon. Amanda Cox Deschamps. So
That
that's
is,
right.
of course, from our, one of our members of our Roman House staff who has gone out on maternity leave. We thank her very much for that note, and we wish her the very, very best.
Yep.
All right. Anybody else hiding any notes? All right. All right, moving on, future meeting dates and agenda items. So our next meeting is on November 8th. The meeting following that would be on December 13th. I'll just say one more time that, as Paul mentioned, this Saturday we'll be dedicating the new gymnasium to Lawrence Cushing Senior, as was the previous gymnasium. And after that, I would accept one final motion.
So
Julie?
moved.
Motion for adjournment?
Yes.
Do I have a second? From Manny, all those in favor? All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.